Have you ever been so sure that you were the one who was right in a situation? You talk to them seriously, but then you slowly realize that you're actually the one in the wrong. They don't avoid you, don't ignore you, and don't try to act like they're right. They even admit they're wrong. If you think things like love bombing or guilt tripping are manipulation, then you're wrong. They're just beginners in the game of manipulation. Because the latest findings from researchers across 48 studies with over 10,000 participants show that the true peak of psychological manipulation isn't people who look dangerous, but the ones who are best at pretending to be stupid around us. So what are the rare tactics they use? Today, let's break down 7 extremely dangerous tactics used by master manipulators. If you've ever been in a situation where you had to ask for money while being broke, you'll understand this feeling. It's time to pay me back. You said last week you'd return the $200, right? They look at you and say, yeah, I know, I'm planning to, but honestly, why do you always talk like this? It feels kind of tense. They act like they've already thought about it and are overwhelmed. You pause for a second, then suddenly feel like you have to explain, no, I'm just asking, it's been a while. At this point, you start feeling a bit awkward, like you're making a big deal out of it, so you say, yeah, it's fine, just pay me when you can. And just like that, the conversation ends there, with no specific date. Why do you feel guilty like that? Because it's a brain mechanism. It tends to protect your self-image, and when being attacked, the amygdala activates. You switch into defensive mode. At this point, your emotions get messy, your prefrontal cortex gets disrupted, so you lose your original goal of the question. Their goal is very simple. They turn you from the one asking to into the one being judged. You immediately feel like you're being too much. Your brain switches to explanation mode. I'm just asking. And just like that, you lose control. That money is almost intentionally forgotten by you. But if this already feels heavy, pay attention to their next manipulation. There's a situation like this. You're about to tell your girlfriend that you want to stop because the relationship is starting to feel exhausting. You think about it, the two of you sit down to talk. But as soon as you start, she already notices your intention. She doesn't react immediately, just stays silent for a few seconds, then speaks softly. She says she's also tired, and that whenever she dreams about a house with someone, they always leave her behind and leave a bruise on her heart. She also says she doesn't want to date anyone after breaking up with you. You freeze. She continues, her voice slow and slightly shaky. You start to feel a weight in your chest. This is no longer a logical conversation. You're no longer in the position of evaluating the relationship, but pulled into the position of the person about to hurt someone who has already been hurt. Your brain's empathy mechanism, mirror neurons, when seeing others in pain, you feel something similar. Oxytocin hormone increases. You lower your guard and trust their words more. They activate bonding hormones to break your final defense line. She doesn't say you're wrong, doesn't stop you, doesn't argue, but you start thinking, if I leave now, I'm just like the guys before. You don't even realize you've fallen into a trap that only she might be aware of. And instead of ending it, you say, maybe we can try a bit more. Most of us have seen this in sales. They always put a ridiculously high price first, then drop it so you feel like you've won, and end up buying at a price where they still profit 2 to 3 times, right? But in reality, there are manipulations like this happening all the time. You just don't notice. For example, you just got off work, pretty tired, and your friend texts asking for help all night. You read it and refuse. You reply that you're tired, but you don't know they already prepared this. Almost immediately, they reply, then just come help me for a few hours. They also add how stressful their days have been. It sounds lighter, and you feel like it's fine, but that was their intention from the beginning, because what they're setting up in your brain is heuristics. They reduce your thinking time and make it easier for you to decide. And the overnight request becomes a manipulation gift. You see it as something heavy because of anchoring bias. The first value you heard became your reference point. You officially get pulled into an impossible task without realizing that from the start there was only one choice. But it gets worse if they combine it with the 4th method called intentional misinterpretation. For example, it's still you after a stressful week helping your friend with deadlines, but your parents want you to visit a distant relative. You say, I can't go home this weekend. I want to stay and rest a bit. You clearly see your mom's sadness and expectation. She stays silent for a few seconds, then says you're giving more to outsiders than to this family. Even when you try to explain that you're tired, Honestly, when your words are intentionally misinterpreted, your brain activates cognitive dissonance. The more you try to explain, the more you lose your original position. Your boundary setting starts breaking from that moment. Your mom. You think about her words. At this point, you feel uncomfortable and a bit guilty. But now the conversation is no longer about you needing rest. It becomes about proving that you're not an ungrateful child. You go to work and get pressured. At first, everything is normal. Then sometimes a coworker starts saying light things like, "Bro, you're kinda slow with tasks sometimes, not gonna lie." You feel a bit uncomfortable, but ignore it, thinking they're just talking nonsense. A few days later, when you finish work slightly later than them, they say again, you start paying more attention. The next week, in a small meeting, they joke, "Yeah, he's good, just a bit slow sometimes." People laugh lightly, no strong reaction, but that sentence gets repeated one more time. At this point, your brain activates familiarity. Your brain feels this is familiar. It switches to shortcut mode. You enter a self-suggestion state, except this time, there's no self-help book for you. Gradually, it starts believing it might be true. Every time you don't finish something immediately, that same sentence echoes in your head. Am I actually a bit slow? There's a truth that in arguments, someone always brings in a third person as evidence. And most of the time, whoever brings in the third person first gets the advantage. But the person being brought in has already heard it beforehand, from only one perspective. Or even if from two people, it still feels vague. So bringing in a third person is one of the strongest manipulation tactics. Because the human brain is extremely sensitive to social rejection. When hearing "everyone thinks that," the brain activates the pain center, similar to physical pain. That makes you want to adjust yourself. Simply put, this behavior evolved from the Homo sapiens era, because being excluded from the group meant death was near, and that still affects us today. And finally, unavoidable, emotional timeout, silence as a weapon. One of the strongest methods that replaces all explanations. Just staying silent, no need to explain anything. The more they act opposite to your expectations, the more uncomfortable you feel. If you argue with them, but what they show is unexpected kindness instead, you feel extremely bad. Because according to brain mechanisms, the brain hates uncertainty. When facing silence, dopamine decreases, cortisol, stress, increases. You fall into a state of overthinking, seeking closure. And when it goes against your emotional expectation that they should conflict with you, but they don't, everything flips. They don't speak, don't give any opinion about what you did to them. Your brain creates the worst case scenario. That's everything I've learned about master manipulators. What do you think? Are there any tactics I got wrong or didn't mention? If yes, let me know more about them. Paw signing out, stay sharp, stay weird.